Welcome to the Life Process Program. I'm Zach Rhoads. I'm a developmental specialist and a coach in our online Life Process Program. Today, I'm going to use my own life as a case study so that I can talk about diagnostic labels, when they're helpful, when they're detrimental, and in the spirit of my using myself as a case study, how they worked or didn't work for me. And I hope that this will help you determine whether or not to accept diagnostic labels in your own life or to label your children or people you care about, versus considering what it means to achieve life purpose and life balance, irrespective of a diagnosis. For me, growing up, it was clear to my teachers and other professionals that I was an intelligent child, and into my teen years, this was true. Yet I had a terrible time reading social situations. I had a tough time making and keeping meaningful relationships or focusing on salient tasks. I had a hard time pursuing any form of academics. These were difficulties for me to the extent that I overused humor and sarcasm to avoid being myself in any social situation. I drank and I used drugs as a way to relax enough to be social. I also skipped classes because I was so behind in them, I had no idea what was going on. It was literally painful to sit through a 1 hour class. I didn't turn in homework. I skipped the classes and I drank. I used drugs some more. I figured as long as I'm going to reap the consequences of my inability to meet basic tasks, I may as well feel well in the short term. So I built a lifestyle around this counterproductive cycle: difficulty fitting the mold academically, difficulty being my authentic self in a social context, finding relief in distractions and drug use, and then I'd start that process over again, but with even greater difficulty meeting life's demands than I had in the first place. Does this sound like something you've encountered before? I was young, and I was lucky, as many people are, to have people who cared about my well being and who noticed that I was struggling. So the response to my struggle came in different forms over the years. As far as school goes, I was diagnosed with mental health and learning disorders from professionals and given a list of accommodations related to my disability that my school and other professionals, people in my workplaces, were supposed to follow. It felt really good to have a diagnosis. It validated the fact that I was struggling. And it seemed like I had some justification for struggling in the first place, kind of like it wasn't really my fault. Funny enough, I didn't really need the diagnosis to receive accommodations. As it turned out, my parents told me later, and I talked to some of my teachers as an adult. My teachers were already providing the accommodations that were listed on this individualized education plan written for me. This individualized education plan, IEP, was built as a reactionary document, a reaction to my inability to do things. Unfortunately, along with labels, also followed a personal belief system that there were some things that I just couldn't do at the level of other mentally healthy or well adjusted people. I found out later in life that something was missing from this list of accommodations. I didn't need extra accommodations or allowances to be able to barely adhere to my academic tasks. And the accommodations didn't really help me in social situations. What I actually needed was a sense of belonging, connection, purpose in my life. So I guess the most crucial element missing from my diagnosis and list of accommodations was my personal observations about my own life. People can help you achieve your own life purpose. People can set up and guide and nurture things that might help you achieve your own life purpose. But nobody but you knows what really makes you feel whole, feel connected, feel like your life has meaning and that you're contributing to it. I was able to sneak by. I finished school, I went to college, I became interested in various topics. I also still believed that I operated in a deficit. I believed in my diagnoses. And I also developed an addiction to heroin in early adulthood. And for a blip, while I tried to pull myself away from an addicted lifestyle, I adopted the addict label. I went to AA. I discussed my life with people who also labeled me and themselves an addict. And I read and listened to opinions that told me that there was a single way forward for me, and the best I could hope for was to keep my addiction at bay. Meanwhile, I grew up, and growing up means more than simply getting older. It means maturing. It means realizing that your beliefs and actions mean more to yourself and others than you once believed. Growing up means engaging with people and things and realizing that preserving those things means more in life than any destructive lifestyle. AA and adopting a disease label did not bring me to sustainable life balance. It brought me a semblance of stability, but not a purposeful life in which I felt like I was fulfilling my potential. I did overcome my addiction and achieve this balance eventually, independent of AA and labels. I started working with children who seemed destined to the same fate as I was. I worked with them on finding their purpose. And in a beautiful cycle of events, this helped me fulfill my own. I became a specialist in helping children through development, and my success in reaching those children made other professionals interested in my work or my ideas. And this feedback loop meant I had to get better organized, which happened naturally because I wanted to keep up this work. I wanted people to continue appreciating the work I was doing, and I wanted to continue helping other people. I had a job, several jobs eventually, and a purpose. I met a woman and I got married. I had a child. And at this point, I know I'm flash forwarding ahead, but at this point, when I had jobs that meant something to me because I constructed them along the way and people appreciating them and this community orientation, my wife, my child, friendships. At this point, I was so far away from the concept of addiction that I couldn't ever imagine going back to destructive drug habits. I never could imagine it since. I still can't. I leaned on this good fortune and my hard work and my community involvement, my newfound appreciation and connection with family, my ability to motivate children and teams of adults who worked with them. I started an educational podcast. Then I wrote a book. I met Dr. Peel and began working with him in the Life Process program. These things all compounded on themselves. And within this framework, my opportunities seem limitless. And my system of values and priorities have changed tremendously. In other words, for somebody with learning disorders who thought he needed accommodations to succeed, I sure am organized. I write a lot of articles and books, for goodness sake. And I'm a respected researcher and leader among people who I consult and within a school district in which I still work. And for being an addict, I sure have a balanced life. I still drink moderately, and despite my addiction to heroin, I've been able to take painkillers as prescribed with no trouble and no second thought because my life means something. Diagnostic labels were welcomed when I was confused about who I was. But it's possible that they ultimately slowed down a developmental process that was natural, one that's actually typical for most people, as I write in my book with Stanton Peele, Outgrowing Addiction with Common Sense Instead of Disease Therapy. If instead of focusing on my deficits alone, I focused on my potential and the things that were worth pursuing, the things that lead to connection and meaning in life, I could have expedited the process of outgrowing these labels and outgrowing my deficits. I can't go back and change the course of my life, nor do I long to do so. However, I can help people, my students, the families who I consult, participants in the Life Process program, to achieve balance in their own lives, independent of diagnostic labels. Sometimes people come to me with a set of problems and with a label. And if that's how a person identifies, I will never argue. But I will encourage them to look at the practical aspects of their lives and the practical aspects of well being and human development so that they never have an impediment to becoming who they authentically are, the way that I think I did. Labels didn't work for me, and that's why I don't use them for other people or push other people towards being diagnosed. This is true in my own practice, and it's true for us here at the Life Process program.